Come on.
They're right there!
Let's go. Move, 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 move.
This episode of Choices Not Chances podcast is sponsored by Louisiana Gun Shop, located on Highway 90 West in Broussard, Louisiana, just south of Lafayette. For more information, stay tuned at the end of this episode. This is Choices Not Chances podcast with Ryan and Matt. I'm your co-host, Matthew Charette. Sitting next to me is Ryan Rogers. Ryan.
Hey everybody, thanks for coming back. And just like any other time, if you see something in this episode that resonates with you, something that you think needs to be shared, we ask that you just share that out. As you can see, today's returning guest is Mark Arrington. He's been on the show a couple of times already. If you haven't seen those, you need to go back and watch them. Great episodes. Me and Mark always rap and have a great time when we're on here. Today specifically, welcome. Today specifically, we're going to be talking about Stoicism, something that me and Mark are always talking about every single time that we get together. Some form of Stoic philosophy conversation comes out, be it at the VFW, out at the range, or even at the house. And so today we're going to get into it. Mark, thanks for coming out again.
Hey, always thanks for having me, man.
And you know, I hate that the
it's all good. It's a beach scene.
Yeah, I hate that it's different, but it's
going to
definitely
lead us into how Stoicism was founded, so it's all good.
That's right. So I want to start off with a couple of quotes, and I'm going to let you kick yours first, and then I'm going to get over to mine. But we're going to just kind of start at the beginning, what we think of Stoicism, and not a class so much, but just more of a talk on it. So what do you got?
So, I mean, as far as quotes go, there's plenty of them out there. I like to kind of attribute a lot of the stuff that Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, and the founding Stoics kind of had. And the main thing that I find about Stoicism, the more that I think about it and look into it, is how influential it was into religion, politics, the Marine Corps, like we were just talking about earlier, and everything else. But if you want to, I know that you have already one that already is created. So, yeah,
in my opening of my book, I did one, Seneca and the Morale Letters, and it says, good people do what they find honorable to do, even if it requires hard work. They'll even do it if it causes them injury. They'll even do it if it brings danger. Again, they won't do what they find base, even if it brings wealth, pleasure, or power. Nothing will deter them from what is honorable, and nothing will lure them into what is base. I think that's huge, especially in the protector archetype, the people that are going out, Marines, police officers, first responders, Army, any kind of military. But if you're you're going out and seeking honor, and we still have those kind of people. I don't think it doesn't seem as though they're as voluminous as it used to be. When I was growing up, I felt like that was always talked about, going after the honor and being an honorable person and having strong moral character. Today, I don't see as much, but I definitely see it in the protector archetype.
Yeah, what I find a lot of times now that I've gotten out is how influential my time in the Marine Corps actually has been in my entire life, right? So, you want to talk about doing things that are abstaining from things that are base, right? But as a Marine Corps, their core values, honor, courage, and commitment, right, very much line up with Stoicism's core values of temperance, justice, courageousness, and wisdom. So I think there's a lot of commonalities there that a lot of people just don't really realize, and a lot of people don't take the time and an effort to actually figure out, cool, I was told these things, but where do they actually derive from? And I think at the end of this kind of conversation me and you have, I hope that our listeners kind of understand, oh wait, that was actually a Stoic principle that I've lived my whole life not even knowing that. It
was Stoicism first.
Practicing Stoicism my entire life, you know what I mean? Like the things that your father teaches you and everything else. It's just doing the right thing. And we had this conversation at lunch earlier. It's the fundamental question I believe in Stoicism is it's what should I do? It's what ought I do, right? It's not what I must do. Like your quote just talked about. It's not about doing the things that you must do. Everybody must do these things if you want to survive, right? But it's, Stoicism as a core kind of tenet is about bringing you at a higher level of morality and a higher level of accomplishment by asking the question, not about what must you do, but what should you do and what ought you do.
Okay. And so let's back up. When did you first start really getting into and researching Stoics and Stoicism?
So I was privileged enough in my time in the on the teams to be able to go get a master's degree, and I got my master's degree from the Joint Special Operations Master's Program that's given out at Bragg from NDU, and through that I kind of started getting more exposed to philosophy. Before that, I just I was more into like mythology, I would say, like Greek mythology and everything else, which is a very a lot of things that we study now are all based off of that as well. And it kind of just dove me into this more like a philosophical journey that I've found myself in today about, Stoicism and what is the right or eudaimonic way to kind of live your life, right? Because ultimately, what's the purpose of life? The purpose of life to me is to get better and to learn. And Stoicism just became part of my path, and it's, kind of became the main road in that path, because it's really hard. What I mean? It's not an easy way to live your life.
It's not easy, but it feels better.
Correct.
In my opinion, we're all students. We talked about this too. Is like we're all students of Stoicism, and I really think that the more research and the more you get into Stoicism or are into Stoicism, seemingly you probably needed to do that research. Like for me, it's hard. Like you said, it's hard, and I don't always do good at it. Yeah. I don't always have good temperance. That's right. My character is lacking in some things.
Yeah, my character is always lacking.
So it's like I'm the one that needs to dive into those books constantly just to keep myself straight and keep myself above, on an even keel. I know one of the biggest things that I love, or for me personally, is The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday.
Yep, read it every day.
3 years running. And every single time I read it, a day that I've already read before, it hits different. And it's like, damn. That's something I always try to push out is like, go pick that book up and every day start out with that. Even start out with that with your kids maybe.
Yep.
And it's been instrumental for me. And I started that probably 3 or 5, it might have been 4 years ago, but it would be like, it became part of my day. Like, I'm going to read this. I'm going to take from it what I can, do a little soft meditation on it. It really helped me through school and through, trials and tribulations that you deal with in life, for sure.
Yeah, I think just I read that book every day, and so does my wife. Actually, she reads it later on in the afternoon. I actually read it right in the morning when I first wake up before I do some meditative practices that I find very helpful to me. But Stoicism, just to me, it's one of those very self-reflective things, and I have found that in today's time and culture, people don't want to look in the mirror, right? They don't want to actually think about the things and the way that their thoughts happen. And everybody really much wants to blame somebody else. You know what I mean? Like, pick a scapegoat, name it. You know what I mean? And Stoicism doesn't teach that. Stoicism teaches that, there are things that are in your control and out of your control, right? And the things that are in your control, you should have control of those things. And,
or do your best about them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nope. And I mean, it's very clear in there, unless you're like Cato the Younger, right? That is like probably the most, austere human being that we ever had on this planet. But, unless like have this idea that you're supposed to be perfect, that's not what Stoicism is about. Stoicism is about like, cool, I made a mistake. Let's ponder on it. Let's reflect on it, and let's be better the next day and learn from it.
And what I love about that is like one of my favorite quotes, not necessarily of Stoicism, but like failure is where growth is found. And that's huge in Stoicism. It's like it's not the end. You might have made a mistake. It's not the end. Now you've made a mistake. Now you have some essay. Now you can change for that next go around and go further. Yeah. And it really teaches that, or really reinforces that, let's say.
Yeah. And I just think people don't really understand like how ingrained like the tenets of this philosophy are in our daily lives in the United States, and then just pretty much throughout the world. I've kind of gotten into a lot of religious studies as of late. I'm trying to read all the great religious books throughout all the cultures. Right now I'm on Hinduism, but there's so many like principles that were very Stoic in nature that found their way into Christianity, for instance, right? The Serenity Prayer, right? The Serenity Prayer is all about the things that are inside your control and outside of your control, and do you have the courage in order to change the things that you think need to be changed that are within your control? And then, even the Golden Rule, right? Treat others as you want to be treated. That is very Stoic in nature, right? If I would not want something to do something to me, right, then I would not do it to them, which is about, vice, desire, action, and assent, all in the same one. So
Sure.
it's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Now, what kind of quotes did you bring as far as like some of your favorites?
So I mean, I didn't bring too many quotes. I just kind of bring like the overall, the concept that actually happened and how Stoicism actually started. So I figured I always like to kind of start out at the beginning.
Sure.
So the first Stoic was actually Zeno. He was a very successful merchant. Right? And he pretty much came to financial ruin. And then through his coming to financial ruin, like you were just talking about, right? So he had some things that happened in his life that, changed his entire aspect of things. And then he developed Stoicism. And I think you can kind of expound upon, where it actually started, which I draw some commonalities between how Stoicism started and then kind of like how the Marine Corps started. Stoicism started on a porch, whereas the Marine Corps started at, Tun Tavern or whatever else. But, essentially he had a group of people that got together. I think they were all had to be very self-reflective in nature.
Sure.
It happened, right after Alexander the Great passed in the Hellenistic period in Greece. And they really just had a lot of self-reflection. And then through that self-reflection, they came up with their core tenets, right? The core tenets of Stoicism. And it's a eudaimonic type of philosophy. And what eudaimonic means is like it's a way of living your life in order to have a fulfilled life, which is, talk about religion. Religion is very eudaimonic in nature. There's a way it is that you're supposed to live your life and not live your life. And obviously they talk about the afterlife a whole lot more than Stoicism does. Stoicism's argument with that would be, I don't know what actually happens after I die. All I know is that I have to face death sooner or later because none of us come out of this world living. So I might as well have a positive mindset in order to be able to deal with that, right?
Sure.
And then, from Zeno, it just kind of continued on. I don't think Stoicism's really big thing really happened once it came into Rome. And we all know, like, probably the most famous Stoic, I would say, is probably Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? The philosopher king, as he is called, right? And then what we have that derives from that, we have Seneca's letters, we have Epictetus's discourses, and then we have Marcus Aurelius's meditations. And a lot of people don't realize that Marcus Aurelius didn't write those for public.
No.
That was for himself. And that was him dealing with the just, I'm sure, crushing weight of responsibility of, running Rome.
Oh, yeah. And the entire empire. I mean,
the entire empire. Yeah. And here we are, like a man that is more powerful than any other person on the planet at the time. And you see how human he is and how self-reflective he is throughout his meditations. And I mean, it's just kind of profound when you think about it, that like here this guy is very much like showing his inner workings, and this type of philosophy helped him run an empire. And that's one of the beautiful things about Stoicism, because Stoicism as a whole, it's applicable, right? And that's one of the things that the Stoics very much had against the Cynics. And the Epicureans that kind of were, not necessarily in competition, but they all kind of derived at the same amount and the same time and place, was that, this is practical. This is something that you can use in your daily life. And to an extent, you can use it for your thoughts.
Sure.
Which is hard.
For your thoughts.
For your thoughts. Yeah. Obviously, your thoughts are your thoughts. I can't control those.
Right. But no, that's a big distinction that I would make for today is that these are my thoughts. Those are your thoughts.
Correct.
You don't have to put those on other people.
Nope.
Even though in this case, it seems like their thoughts have helped millions of people after them live fulfilled lives of character and morale. So, there's huge things to take away from them. Like Marcus Aurelius was probably the first one that I got into. About the meditations, I started reading them, and in the beginning, to be honest, like it's a hard read. For me, it was hard, but you're talking about somebody that's not writing it for me. You're talking about somebody that's writing it for him.
That knows his own mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're
and so that's a part of absolutely. That's a part of the meditations that when y'all pick it up and you start going through it, understand that he wrote this from his mind, for his mind, not for yours. But man, there's some golden nuggets in there for sure. Yeah. What else you got?
So I think just the overall concept of, Stoicism's idea of things that are in my control and out of my control, right? And their whole process of like, I want to call it, it's desire, right? So they have desire, action, and assent. Those are like the three like overall like premises of like kind of actions that you can take as far as your own like schema, your own like mindset. And then they have obviously the 4 tenets of being a virtuous, right? So eudaimonic life means that you live a virtuous life. And I think a lot of people don't think in that kind of nature anymore, right? They think about right here, right now, and what I want. Right. Whereas it's not about desire at that point, because now you have these, you have your 4 core values of Stoicism, which is, justice, temperance, wisdom, and courageousness. Right. So, you start getting into temperance, right? You start getting into, how much of something should you actually be doing? And, Stoicism would teach you then, like, you shouldn't do any one thing too much.
Right.
Right. If that's self-pity, guilt, even, being overly positive. Everybody knows like a toxic positive person. It's like, bro, it's like, this isn't
too much.
This isn't a positive moment right now. Like, just kind of keep your opinions to yourself. But, and I think that people don't really think about stuff like that anymore, because they don't think about living a eudaimonic life. They don't think about living the way that they should live. And I think so many people get caught up in like, oh, you got to live in the present, man. It's YOLO. You only live once, yo. And I'm just like, that's not, I think they're just very like, just off on how they kind of interpret things. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that they really understand the actual purpose behind a lot of the statements that they make.
I think that's true.
And if everything's always all about you, then how are you a net positive?
Agreed. I agree completely. I don't know where that slips though. Is it technology that makes that slip? Or made that slip? We talked about it offline. Like, I don't believe that the kids talk about Rome much anymore in school or learn anything from it. It's like, there's a lot to be learned there. There's a lot to be learned there, and we don't do it. I think that's why I got into it. Is like, I looked at Stoicism like this well I could drink from and get knowledge from these past people, and I never, why didn't somebody tell me about this before I was 30 is the way I felt about it. You know what I mean? It took me until I was 30 to kind of find the well. And now that I found the well, I want other people to drink from the well, because it's made my life, better. It's been a net positive for me. There was nothing that I've ever flipped through while researching the Stoics that made me worse, or it just gave me a lot of examples of maybe what not to do or how not to feel.
At the end of the day, every time I read a lot of this stuff, even if I'm having a hard day, it just keeps telling me, it's like, be better. Like, you can always be better. You can always, at a minimum, learn something about yourself. And that's what it's just ultimately teaching, right? It's teaching, hey, listen, like, you're going to have emotions. You're going to have all of these things that kind of transpire in your life. And it gives you a very applicable way to deal with this reality that we find ourselves in. Right? I mean, to an extent, like, most of the Stoics are like, oh, look, even my philosophy is show me how to face death. And they had this really interesting, like, kind of dynamic about death is like, every moment I'm dying, right? Yeah. Death only stops when I die. You know what I mean? So from the time I am born to the time I no longer breathe, I am dying that entire time. So you might as well just understand that, accept it, and then make yourself better for it.
Sure. I think you're right. Well, what was the quote you said at lunch? Every man has 2 lives.
Yep, Ernest Hemingway. So Ernest Hemingway stated, every man dies 2 deaths. The first time is when you're put into the ground. The second time is when nobody remembers your name. And in the same way, a man could become immortal. And I think the whole concept behind that is, if you live a eudaimonic and virtuous life, perhaps people will remember your name if that's part of your ambition, right? So
Sure.
I mean, now we're talking about, you got to think about it. We're talking about people that wrote about philosophy, and it was a philosophy of like being human and a philosophy of thought, 2,300 years ago, and we're still remembering their name, like Cato, Seneca, Epictetus. Like, we're talking about them today. So in that kind of way, like, Hemingway was right. They're still alive.
Still immortal.
They're immortal.
Yeah,
They're never going to be forgotten. And I think they're never going to be forgotten because they really had a lot of self-reflection, and they really had to ask themselves, like, what should I do at every single point in time? And to the point where, like, I think about my thoughts a lot. You know what I mean? I'm like, man, that, this is angering me, and why? And another thing that they're really heavy on is judgment. Judgment and then comparison. right? And I find myself doing this shit all
Like
the
what? Give me
time.
an example.
So if somebody walks in, right, just because of the way they're dressed, I will begin to judge them. And I try not to.
Is
right?
it judging, or is it you taking like a, what would you say that is? Just kind of like scoping your surroundings and make sure you're profiling who's coming in and out of your immediate surroundings, or is it like literally like, oh, look at this guy, he doesn't work out enough and he eats too much. Okay, got
right?
it.
That's judgment, right? So
That's
because
judgment,
at the end of the day, I don't understand like that guy's actual situation.
Sure.
And then judgment truly is assigning good and bad to things, which I do all the time, right? Because they say like, the main example that I've heard a lot of times is like, an apple. Even a rotten apple. At the end of the day, it's not good or bad. It's just an apple, right? Like maybe you just didn't eat it soon enough, but at the end of the day, a rotten apple is still an apple, right? Mm-hmm. I'm just now assigning my judgment to it to say if that apple is good or bad.
Sure.
Right? So it's just a whole different way of kind of thinking about things, because at the end of the day, that's an apple. At the end of the day, like, man, I find myself sometimes being like, oh, dude, it's freaking raining today. Really? Today? Like, that's not in my control.
Yeah.
Right?
Why are you even bitching about it?
Why am I even wasting
Yeah.
my mental capacity on the fact that I'm upset that the weather changed outside? I'm not in control of the weather.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It is what it is, and we got to keep going.
Right. My wife's having a bad day. That's not in my control. At the end of the day, I can try to make it better. But at the end of the day, like, that's her mindset at that time.
That's right.
Not my mindset. And I think Stoicism just gives you that kind of practical knowledge and ways to think about your daily life that would lead to a more, as they would call it, a more eudaimonic life, a more fulfilled life. A life with a purpose.
I think in school, one of my teachers said we should learn how to think about our thinking while we're thinking. And I thought about that, and I was like, think about the way that I think while I'm actually doing it. So it makes a lot of sense. And I think ever since then, it's like, of course I slip, and that's why we're having this talk. I slip, I stumble, I fall. Sometimes I just downright don't do things I know I ought to be doing.
You should be doing, yeah.
Maybe because it feels better to do another thing, or it feels better to sleep in, or it feels, whatever the fuck it is. But if we constantly had that loop going of, okay, what am I thinking about? What am I supposed to do? Why do I feel that way about needing to do that? Mm-hmm. And then why am I making decisions or placing those judgments or blames? I don't even know these people.
Yep.
So it's great. And if we could perfect that, which will never happen, but the better that we get at that, I think the better off we are, and the severe sphere of influence that we hold, for sure.
Well, I think that's what Stoicism teaches you, right? It's not about, like, perfection is always a goal, right? Mm-hmm. If I could be perfect, I would, right? I assume you would say the same thing. If you could be perfect, you would be perfect.
Sure.
But unfortunately, we're human, and there's no perfect humans out there. So what Stoicism would teach you to do is how to drive your thought process and your just kind of like mental, like, perspective on this reality that we find ourselves in into a better direction that is not judgmental and is more just virtuous as a whole, and that's when you just kind of have to get into like the 4 tenets of Stoicism, right? So like wisdom, I would want to know as much stuff as I could possibly know.
Yeah, I agree.
Like you should, right? But then there's so many people nowadays that are just, they think they know things, which is terrifying to me. Mm-hmm. Like I'm a very Socratic way of thinking. The only thing I know is that I know nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like straight up. I don't really know anything. I don't really even know if we exist right now, because we can have a conversation about that if you really want to, because we could be living in a reality that we don't even know because we're in it.
Right.
So, wisdom is one of those things that's just like this, like, carnal drive for knowledge that a lot of us just don't continuously pursue.
Do you think it's because people get like comfortable in their lives and things become like, it's either that or it's like their needs aren't being met, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, mm-hmm. and they don't have the needs being met to even go up that next level to worry about wisdom and self and helping others, because they are on that bottom rung. They don't even have shelter, or they don't even have food. Like, they're not thinking about those things. But of the people that do have security and health and comfort, do you think it's because they have that comfort, and that security? They're like, well, why would I go? Like, I've heard people say, well, why would I get a doctorate? It's not going to help me get paid anymore. It's like, no, you're right. It's not going to help you get paid anymore. But like, you might learn something that completely changes the way you view life or your job or your occupation or whatever, and then you may want to go in a different direction because of the wisdom or the knowledge that you're gaining.
Or you could gain that wisdom and you could actually help society.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You know what I mean? So
it's like, well, that's not going to help me with my job though, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of money, or it's a lot of whatever X that I don't want because of what. So it's like people stopped, not all people, but you see what I'm saying? That generally, people have stopped sacrificing the now for what could be from that, or like, especially with knowledge, where knowledge is concerned.
Yeah, so it's Epicurean in nature, right? So the Epicureans actually thought about life is supposed to be about pleasure, right? And the pursuit of pleasure and the enjoyment of pleasure, right? And that's where like Epicureanisms and Stoics kind of very much diverge. And a lot of people think Stoicism, and this is a misnomer about Stoicism, that Stoics are like, oh, like tight upper lip, just never like, no emotions whatsoever or anything else like that. Like Marcus Aurelius never had fun or anything else. That's not accurate at all. You do enjoy life. It's just that you are self-reflective enough to understand that you can't overindulge in quick fixes, because quick fixes are seldomly long-lasting in nature. And then at the end of the day, once those quick fixes are taken away, you're just looking for the next one. Yep. You're looking for the next hit. You're looking for the next whatever you have, man. So, Stoicism would teach you to, do the hard things because they are going to ultimately make you better in the long run.
Sure. Yeah.
Which is a hard thing to do.
It is.
Yeah, it's
especially
hard.
The younger you are. Like as you start to grow, and like I heard people tell me that like when you get older, you're going to see things differently. You do 100%, especially with kids and like being a contributing member to your community or to your society. You see things way different. The way people treat each other is different. The way that they ought to treat each other is different. The way that you see yourself and like your morality and your future becomes different every year. So, and I think that's why 3-4 years in a row, I can read the Daily Stoic every day and take something different from it.
Well, you're different every time you read the Daily Stoic.
Yeah, it's not the same man and it's not the same river.
You're not. Yeah, absolutely. And that is another kind of Stoic thing, right? Because at the end of the day, the second, like the words that are coming out of my mouth right now, that Mark's dead already. Yeah. Like I can't get him back. Yeah. Right now, I only have to be able to go forward, right? And it's just kind of very Stoic kind of concept of like the only time that you honestly truly have is right now. And then a Stoic would tell you then you should live it to the utmost. Yeah, absolutely. Right?
I think it's a lot of people think that, I'll just get it tomorrow, I'll do it tomorrow or whatever, but people don't realize that tomorrow, 20 years is boom, it's gone. Yeah, it is. And the younger you are, people tell you that and you don't believe it. And then you look up and it's been 15 years and you say, oh, yeah, 15 years, you got about 45 good ones left.
Yeah.
After, you know what I mean? So it's like,
I remember the yellow footprints, man. I remember driving the bus and putting my head down, and that was freaking 20 something years ago now, dude.
And it seems like that,
dude. Because and then so that's about wisdom. So I think that everybody needs to have a drive to learn, and at the end of at the minimum, learn something about yourself. If you can't learn. Like you should just be hungry for knowledge as a whole. Like to me, dude, I just wish I could just shove more and more in my head. And we have so much knowledge at our fingertips now. It's freaking
all of it. It's all of it, literally on your phone.
Yeah,
the entire human written
conscious history. Yeah. Anything you want to know, you freaking Google it. Look it up on YouTube. YouTube's a great resource for all that stuff. And then, going into it just to live a virtuous life. And I mean, I believe in like just core tenets of things, right? So. Like we were just talking about the Marine Corps, honor, courage, and commitment, right? Three words, but they mean so much in order to actually take those things to fruition. So I always looked, in my own kind of inner monologue and everything else, I always put wisdom really high on, the virtues. Depending on who you read, some of them would be like, oh, no, justice. Justice is most important. I would argue that if I'm wise, I'm just. Right? If I'm wise,
or at least if you're wise, you can at least tell the difference between just and unjust.
Yes. Yeah. And then I guess we can just go into justice, right? So what does it mean to be just? In my opinion, to be just means just that you did your best at any circumstance that you find yourself in, right? Because you can't really say like I did the right thing or the wrong thing, because hey, time has a lot of factor in that, right? Because you might have done the wrong thing right now, but it led to so much more learning down the road that maybe it was the right thing that you did, because ultimately, and that's something that's really hard for us too. Ultimately, the only thing that you can do is actually what you did, right? You can always learn from it. But at the end of the day, shoulda, coulda, wouldas don't really exist because you did what you did, which is just a hard pill to swallow for some of us.
Especially if what you did was not right.
Correct. Yeah. But once again,
or was it?
A Stoic could say that you learned from it. So perhaps you should have just had more control over your reason and your temperance and your logos, your logic at that time, right? Because Stoicism is very logic based.
Yep.
And a lot of people have problems with logic. They do.
What do you think? What do you mean?
They just have problems with logic. They have problems with absolutes. You know what I mean? And everybody has their own concept of what's logical and what's not logical, and there's a bunch of different dictums of it or whatever else you want to say. But at the end of the day, people actually do have an issue with logic, and a lot of times you're like, cool, man, you made that choice, and that choice was a vice-based choice. It wasn't a wise-based choice, right? It wasn't a virtuous-based choice. You chose out of vice, and a lot of people have a really hard time being self-reflective enough to be like, yeah, man,
look, nobody wants to hear their own shortcomings.
Yeah,
nobody does.
yeah.
It's a hard thing to do, but it makes us better.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's why you surround yourself with people that will call your shit out.
100%. Well, I think that's why, not to hate on anybody else, but I just spent a week, learning a new trade, learning a new thing, doing a new thing, and I spent it with Marines. Well, there's great things about that. The great thing is nobody cares about your feelings.
Nope.
So they're going to say, this is the way it needs to get done. If you have questions, ask. But however long it takes. And that's the way I came up. So it was very nice. Like, oh, roger that. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to ask some questions. But if you when you fuck something up or when I fuck something up, it's not that I want to wallow in it and bask in it, but I want you to come right to me and tell me this is what you did wrong. This is how we fix it. I don't want you to say, well, you did okay. You did pretty good. No. I want to do great. So tell me how to do great. Don't tell me how that's okay. Tell me how to do great. Yeah. And Marines will do that for you.
Yeah.
For sure.
I never wanted to hear about the good things I did. I in every superior that ever kind of had gave me some criticism or whatever else, my first question is always what I do wrong, because I want to know what I did wrong.
Let me start there.
Yeah. And that's honestly journaling is a very Stoic thing in nature. That's what Marcus Aurelius is why we have the meditations today, and that's why we have discourses and the moral letters from Seneca and so on and so forth. But how I kind of journal today is I honestly journal by improve on one side of the page and then sustain on the other side of the page.
This is the things you're doing well.
This is what I messed up on yesterday, and I do it. I try to do it every day. This is what I jacked up yesterday, but then I always try to end it on the sustain, because you're always negative, and we as Marines were horrible about being perfectionists.
Self-denigration.
Horrible about being perfectionists. So I got a question for you. This is maybe a personal question. How long do you allow yourself to kind of fixate on failure?
I don't think about it.
Oh, really?
I don't think about failure. And when I first started this podcast, somebody said, have you thought about what's how crushed you'll be when this fails? And it's nah, I don't think about it. It doesn't come in my head. And some people do, and that keeps their drive going, and they got their contingencies and their tertiary plans in case, and that's great. Just not that person. I say, I'm going to do that one thing, and I'm going to do it until it's done. If I'm passionate about it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to figure it out. Now, if it's I guess it's context, right? So that'd be my work side of things. But if it's I fucked up something in my marriage, or I messed something up with my children.
How long?
There's a period of time where I'm going to really beat myself up, and it might be a period of weeks.
Oh, yeah, I tried.
It might be a period of days. It just depends on the severity of the jack up, probably. Yeah.
I'm a 24-hour. I've tried.
Give yourself a day.
a day.
It's probably a good idea.
I'll fixate on something for a day, be like, oh man, I really jacked up on that or whatever else. But I find after 24 hours, if I'm still I need to move on, right? I think whatever self-denigration I was doing to myself in that 24 hours, I'm good now. Check.
You let yourself have it.
I let myself have it for a day.
If it's something horrible with my children and they get hurt because of my, you know what I mean? Or my wife or my relationships, it's probably going to be more than a day. As far as work, or I think you got a good idea going there. I don't even know if I give myself that long. It's fuck that up. Did you tell? Okay. Yeah. Got it. I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah.
Push.
Yeah. A day, but I don't know. Once it's in
But if it's bad, dude, it's more than a day for me.
Yeah. Once it's in your head, it's in your head. That's the thing about it, man.
Yeah, for sure.
So we talked about justice, and justice is kind of just one of those kind of core tenets that they have, right? But I think a lot of times, especially in today's society, the thing that we're really having an issue with is temperance, and a lot of people, have a real issue with temperance because we have so many things at our fingertips, man. So many things. If you want something, it's a click away.
Yep.
Amazon have that shit to you tomorrow.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And thinking about temperance and how much I should and should not do any one thing, it's difficult, man, because it's such a fine line. And people that are more like on the cusp of being a little bit more extreme than others, right? Sure. I consider myself like a hot sauce person, right? You know what I mean? I like things that are a little bit spicy, I guess. And temperance is always just one of those things that's really hard to figure out and follow, man. And I think it's one of those things that in today's society really needs a lot of self-reflection, because you can overindulge in anything, even the good things. I think you said it earlier, too much of anything is a bad thing. Correct. Yeah. So too much temperance is bad, right? At the end of the day, like too much, thinking about justice too much would be lack of temperance, right? Yeah. You know what I mean? Because now what happens if you think about justice too much? You're just not going to do anything. Yeah. You're going to sit on the fucking couch, because at the end of the day, like, cool, I'm not hurting anything. I'm not being unjust in anything if I don't move from my couch.
But you're not moving.
Right. Which is not living a eudaimonic life, right? You're not living a virtuous life if you're not helping anything, Sure. So I think temperance is one of those things that definitely needs to kind of get looked at in today's society. And we have so many influences on our attention that it becomes very problematic. And especially, I know you got kids, I got kids, man, but like their little attention spans nowadays, just because so much things are like influencing them at all times. It's just getting shorter and shorter, man.
I think it's not just the kids. I think it's the adults as well. I think their attention spans are so freaking quick. And it's like the difference in YouTube. You see these people with 8-second to 20-second videos, and they're all viral. People are tearing them up. And it doesn't really matter what they are. Nope. But you have a deep form podcast about something that matters. No. Yeah, people are going to look at it, see it, and I'll get the next thing.
Yeah, thanks, dude. Yeah.
And maybe it becomes my job then to find that happy medium to where I can give them their medicine how they want it. And maybe that becomes the influencer's job. And, take like if you take Jocko's stance on extreme ownership, like that's, that about them. Now it becomes your job to give them what you need to give them within their parameters that they'll accept them. And that for me is difficult.
I really like the podcast and the extreme ownership and, extreme leadership and everything else. And I wonder where they got a lot of that from.
From the Stoics.
Yes.
They talk about it.
Yes. Yeah. Right. It's very stoic in nature. And the thing that really drove me over to this kind of philosophy is just how difficult it is.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like you're never like, oh, I am now stoic, right? Never.
So yeah, it's not a black belt that you earn.
Absolutely not, dude. Like you are going to have to work on yourself every single day.
And it's like when you think you've gotten to the place where you can say that, you're not there.
Nope.
Like we talked about that. If you get to a place where you're telling people you're stoic, you need to pick the book back up.
Yeah.
And go further into it.
Yeah, you're not helping enough people or whatever else. And then another aspect of it is, their thing is like there's good emotions, right? They look at love as a good emotion. They look at, you can have desires and everything else as long as they're virtuous desires. But their main thing is about anger, right? And their argument is that anger never really has a place, and anger is always going to be a failure of a Stoic.
I think that's a lot of my issues. Rage, and uncontrolled anger about things that don't rate to.
Yes, but what about those things for the most part that you get pissed off about? Are you in control of those things?
No, most of the time it's like we said earlier. Like most of the times it's not something I have control over anyway. So correct. If I have control over it, I'm probably controlling it, and I'm not getting angry. But if I don't, whoa.
Yeah.
That's
control,
what gets hard.
Yeah, control is an interesting mistress, isn't she? But yeah, man. So that's the thing about that anger, right? So they say that anytime that you ever actually lose your temper and you like go towards anger, you've kind of given up on your virtues, and that's definitely been my like hardest thing, and like you have to kind of self-reflect on times you're like, holy shit, dude, I was an asshole. You know what I mean? It can't always be somebody else. You know what I mean? It can't be like, oh, well, like you pissed me off. It's like, no, that is not real. That is not reality. Like you can touch me and you can hit me, right? Like you can do these things because you're a human, I'm a human, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, what I am in control of is if I actually got angry about it and how did I react to it, or did I actually respond to it, right? Which is also a very like kind of Stoic kind of concept of the difference between reaction and response, right? So if you're a good practicing Stoic, you respond to things, right? Unless of course you have to react, because obviously we're still animals at the end of the day. You have a fight or flight. Like you punch me in the mouth, like something's going to happen.
There's some inborn things you're not.
There's something that's going to happen, but at the end, but I can respond to that if I actually like have, the self-control. And that's also something that this kind of philosophy has taught me more of is self-control, because honestly it's the only true thing that you actually have control over is self.
Your emotions and your attitude, your responses,
and the way you perceive things, and what happens when you do perceive those things.
I mean, that's a big reason for the title of my podcast. You could have any chance come up against you, but you always have a choice to react in the way that you want, to respond in the way that you want. It doesn't always have to be react, but you have that choice. You could get angry, you could get defensive, you could turn to love, you could smile. Like there's all these different ways, and it's all on you to choose. I think the younger that you are, the less control you have of that. Toddlers have way less control than adults.
They don't have as much wisdom.
Yeah, but that's where the wisdom comes in. As you gain wisdom, you realize what you can, what you can't, and how you should respond or react to those situations. Yeah, the wisdom part is a necessity, but it will always come down to you making a choice. You're going to have choices.
So do you want to talk about, nature? Nature plays a big role in Stoicism.
Let's go.
So nature, right, is they look at it as is it human nature? Is it nature as this like entire like thing, right? Because they all kind of thought that like nature was kind of like God, right? And they believed in, like Stoics believed in, like at that time, the gods, right? And Marcus Aurelius had a pretty interesting quote about the gods, and he's like, either the gods don't care about you, or you should probably just do the right thing anyways. And I'm paraphrasing, because ultimately he's like, cool, man, like the gods really don't probably care about you as much as you probably think that they care about you. And ultimately, like, you should still always do the right thing regardless whether or not you think God's watching or not.
Right.
But then they talk about nature, and they talk about human nature, and they talk about that we have like, you should be one with your nature. They say not to go against your nature. And they also have this other like kind of concept, and it's about fate. Right? Chance, right? Everybody kind of has this like overall like thought process about chance and things that happen. But their argument about nature is you can overall never really get away from your own nature, but you can always be in control of your responses.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I would kind of dictate their idea of nature and so on and so forth. And then their idea of fate is that, you did not choose to be born into the body that you find yourself in, right? Like for me, for instance, right? I didn't choose to have ulcerative colitis, right? It happened by chance, right? But at the end of the day, a Stoic would tell you that it is still ultimately up to you how you take like your, present time and present situation and make yourself better going forward.
That's right. And that goes with anything. I mean, sickness, loss of a child, loss of a spouse, loss of a friend, you're going to be hit, and life's got those presents for you and waiting, and none of us get through this without those presents. That comes. It's just, are you going to be ready to deal with them, or are you not going to be? Like, I've seen people deal with death in great, honorable, almost like, how did you even, I don't know how you did this. I don't know how you dealt with this blow so well. And then other people don't deal with it well. I mean, they're to the extremes. I had people, like lost Marines, and go and see their families, and they're gracious and hugging and warm, and I don't understand that, how they could be so, loving and caring and warm still. And then you see other people that, they killed themselves because of it. because their kid didn't make it back, or their buddy, and like that's the complete opposite way. And both of those people were faced with two very similar situations, and one chose love, caring, nurture, and one chose angry, death, destruction. I don't understand it. I don't really understand both of them. I'm somewhere right in that middle lukewarm area, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a Stoic perspective, I think that death happens to us all. I think it's about accepting it, and then through accepting it, you are better prepared for it. And I think that's what they would kind of tell you, right? Like, things are going to happen in your life, but through the practice of this philosophy, I think that you will be better prepared for those things that happen because you understand and you realize and you accept that things are going to happen to you. Mm-hmm. And it's just all about your perspective and your reaction or response to those things.
Yep.
As far as living a eudaimonic life, which obviously, I think that's the ultimate purpose in life, is to live a eudaimonic life, right?
Something
live
fulfilling.
Mm-hmm. Right? At the end of the day, like, I want to be on my deathbed and be like, you know what? Yeah. It was good. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, you don't want to be on your deathbed full of regrets.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
That's way more costly than the alternative. Yeah. So, eudaimonic life, courage, temperance, justice, wisdom.
Yep. 4 things. And if you have, and obviously you're going to have, everybody's going to be a little different.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Like,
well, and it's going to mean different things, right, to them.
Yeah, apparently, Cato the Younger was probably the most just freaking human being that ever existed. I mean, he bested a Roman soldier when he was a boy. A Roman soldier came and got him and held him from his foot over a cliff, I think is as it said. And Cato literally had no reaction whatsoever. And the Roman soldier had to bring him back in and say, like, I've been bested by a child, because he was just like, whatever, dude, send it. You know what I mean? Like,
full sin. I'm ready.
Yeah, full sin, man. Like, I'm gonna control my emotions, and you're not gonna get the better of me at this time. But I think everybody has a mixture of all 4 of those things. But I would argue that the people that are actually listening to this podcast, that actually want to research this thing, those are the same people that are already on a path of betterment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like if you're here, you're already started that journey.
Correct. Yeah. You might be criticizing yourself. You might be, like, oh man, I should have done, shoulda, coulda, woulda, is a bunch of other shit. But ultimately, I think if you, somehow have found this kind of philosophy part of your path in life, like, you're already on the path to eudaimonia, dude. You're already on a path to somehow fulfilling your path, right? Mm-hmm, like, to have a fulfilled life at the end of your days. And I just think that it's ultimately just, dude, this is just one of those philosophies. It's just about betterment. And the reason that I just like it so much is, dude, it's freaking hard, because you can just always get a little bit better at it. Mm-hmm. You're never going to be like, I got this. No,
it's not something you're going to master. To me, it's like golf for an amateur.
Yeah, I feel
you're
like
going to get angry. You're not going to like it sometimes. You're definitely not going to perfect it.
No.
But you can always practice it and get a little bit better. Yeah. A little bit better.
Ask me on the other side.
Yeah.
Dude, if we link up sometime about how it exists or some shit, dude, ask me on the other side. Be like, so, dude, how do you feel?
Did you remember that crazy conversation we had about 300 years ago?
Yeah. But no, man. I think it's definitely one of those things that it's very much needed in our society. And I don't have all the answers when it comes to this stuff. It's one of those type of things where you're gonna read stuff. There's a ton of stuff on YouTube. Like, you can just look up Marcus Aurelius quotes and literally just put that thing on play in the morning, and you're not gonna be upset for your day.
And go.
Yeah. Even like my kids nowadays, like they listen to it, and like they ask questions about it and everything else, which is just, it's just one of those things that, this knowledge just kind of needs to get out a little bit more. And I think the more people that kind of understand this stuff, they'll start building correlations to a lot of things that already were part of their lives, and they can just make them a little bit better.
I think so too. I think that if nothing else, it's a positive philosophy. Oh, it's not a negative philosophy. No. And we have plenty of negativity. Everybody knows it. Throughout our whole world, we have plenty of negativity going on, our country and our world. So if we could just have people buy into this positive philosophy, and then, gosh, if even some of them started to practice it, obviously I'm being general, there are. Yeah. But it's nothing but a net positive to everybody around you, for a fact.
Yeah. I mean, I would just, recommended reading. There's a ton of good stuff on YouTube about this. The great courses, if you're one of those like kind of adult learners, there's a great course on applying Stoicism in daily life. It's taught by a professor, PhD. Very, very good, very practical. Obviously, we already talked about the Daily Stoic. Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. You already said it is kind of a hard read, but it's one of those ones that like you're not reading chapters.
No.
Like you're gonna read a page.
You're reading thoughts.
Yeah, you're gonna read a page or two, and then you need to just like kind of put the book down for a little bit and just kind of think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like Epictetus. I think he's one of the few Stoics. I mean, he was born a slave, and he really was able to like really crawl his way up through the values and his virtuousness of his character. Seneca is very. He's very smart. A lot of his stuff really makes a lot of sense. He's the one that actually talked about, hey, like my philosophy even prepared me for death. But unfortunately, if you kind of look back at like the history of Seneca and everything else, he was kind of absent when it came to Nero.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a hard pill to swallow. But at the end of the day, a lot of his stuff it's very logical, right? Logic is logic, whether or not like Hannibal Lecter teaching me logic or Jesus Christ teaching me logic. Logic to me is logic.
Mm-hmm.
There is no good or bad in logic. It's just logical or not.
Just the way it is.
Just
or
the way
not.
it is. Or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would just suggest people if you're looking at this, me and Ryan are like no way experts in this. I would never say that I was.
Not.
Maybe when I give my last breath, I'd be like, okay, I kind of got it, but maybe not. But yeah, I would just research it, and like if you got questions on this stuff, or you just kind of want to like just talk about this stuff, like this is my like passion when it comes to things that don't involve my work.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like talking about this type of stuff, like talking about things that make a eudaimonic life, right, is pretty much like the ultimate like conversation that I will have literally with anybody. I don't care where you come from or everything else, but it's always a conversation that you can have with another human, because their concept of it and my concept of it will be a little bit different, and I can always learn something.
Absolutely. And let's do that when we go into conversation. Go into the conversation to learn something. Don't go into a conversation to tell everybody how much you know about something. Like something that I used false on. I used to do it all the time. I wanted to show everybody how smart I was or how much I knew. And now I go in, like earlier we talked about, I go in like a sponge. I want to sit there and be quiet, and I want to ask questions. And I want to understand what you know, how you know it, where you knew it from, who told it to you, where you got, and then I can take that, understand what they're saying, maybe add something helpful. But if not, I can take that back and I can learn that then. I can go learn where they learned it.
Yeah. Learn and apply. Learn and apply.
And then the next conversation that we have will be much better, because I'll come from a situation where I understand a little bit. I have some essay on that last conversation or whatever the conversation is. We should be doing that with everything that we're talking about.
Everything.
For sure.
Everything that is virtuous.
Yeah.
Yep.
Agreed.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, like you just talked about, right? So like asking questions is just one of those just fundamental things that like I don't think we do enough of anymore.
For sure not.
And I don't think that a lot of us were told so much what to think instead of how to think.
And
that is a lot more difficult. And
it's like I think I didn't learn how to think or how to think until I was in college.
Yeah.
Like my entire education growing up, like we didn't talk about that.
It's what to think. It's indoctrination a lot of times. Like
it's what to think, not how.
Yeah, elementary schools indoctrination, boot camps indoctrination. Like it's indoctrination, right? So I need to get you indoctrinated into this type of like community that we find ourselves in, and then I find like once you if you can accept some of that indoctrination, you're obviously always going to be your own person, but then you can have those commonalities there where you can kind of expound upon things, right? Because now everybody knows that like, hey, at least this person has this type of character.
Sure.
He can conform to society, and ultimately, like, society is good. I'd rather have society than not have society.
For sure. I mean, it's kind of amazing. It's amazing that we can even do the things that we do with each other, in my opinion, without killing each other.
Yep.
I'm serious.
No, 100%. No. So, I tell people that want to bitch about the government and society all the time, we have a conversation about their stake and how, it's because of society that I'm not freaking murdering them for their stake right now. And they're like, okay, No, I get it. I was like, yeah, exactly, dude, because I have repercussions if I do that. Other than
Savvy?
Other than if I didn't, then I'd just have a steak.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, some people would have steak.
Yeah, some people wouldn't, some people wouldn't. But no, man, as always, man, I appreciate you coming, having me on here.
Yeah, absolutely. I
hope,
appreciate you coming back on for the however many time, third or fourth time.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll still do it.
Yeah, I mean, I hope, and if you're in the audience, man, by all means, if just ask questions, or if you have a quote from your favorite Stoic, put it in the comments.
Oh yeah, let me see them.
So that you can kind of share that. I didn't really want this just to be like, quote after quote after quote. I wanted to kind of have like the overall kind of concept of Stoicism. You can read the quotes, and that's kind of how a lot of this obviously derives from. But, I just wanted to have everybody just kind of have the overall basis of the methodology. And if I could just probably sum up Stoicism in one sentence, it would be, what should one do?
Yep. Check. All right, guys, that's what we got for you today. I hope that you enjoyed the talk, and I hope at least this talk, although it may not have gotten deep in the weeds, I hope that at least sparked questions in your mind to go if you haven't gotten into some of these learnings yet. But until next time, let's drop those comments. Let us know your favorite quotes. We'll be back and forth on it. Make sure that I tag Mark into it, but we definitely want to see it. We want to communicate back and forth. So if you got something, let us hear what you've got. Until then, we'll see you next time. Choices, not chances, guys.
Stay virtuous.
Well, that concludes this episode. Thanks for listening to Choices Not Chances podcast. Please share, like, and subscribe wherever you listen or watch our podcast. You can also follow us on social media at Choices Not Chances podcast. Thanks, and have a great day.
Louisiana Gun Shop, your firearm headquarters, specializing in concealed carry guns, ammo, and training. You can get your Louisiana permit with us. Also a large selection of AR-15s, or if you are that build-it-yourself type of guy or gal, we have all the parts to build and customize your own AR-15. Glock, SIG, Taurus, Ruger. We have all the brands, both in the store or at LouisianaGunShop.com.
Not too far. You're marking a building. Hit him. Yeah, that's good.
That's a good shot. That's money. Yeah.